Freedom and censorship can't exist in the same world. And that's true whether it's the government or private corporations who do the censoring. Hi, I'm Ron Coleman, and welcome to the ColemanNation podcast. It's a show where I sit down with guests to discuss the future of free expression and thought in our interconnected world. Here we will focus on issues involving social media, cancel culture, and free expression that everybody who cares about ideas or freedom should be wrestling with. Hey, I'm very excited today. I've got one of my really good friends who I've never met in person, like most of my friends these days, Dan Hull, who we have been in contact for years. And in fact, we've known about each other for many years, going back to the days of the blog review. As is my custom, I don't chew up your time talking about who I'm talking with. You can run him down, and Dan is going to tell us a little bit about himself. Anyway, he's got lots of thoughts. Dan has spent a lot of time. He is a lawyer in DC. He is a blogger who has been kicked off almost every platform at one point or another. But his background isn't what you think it would be. Nothing about Dan Hull is what you think it would be. So Dan, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it, both of you. This is I'm excited to do it, and I think all of your listeners should know that I begged to be on this program.
It's true, you did, but
I know I did.
I can. You kind of told me that it wasn't so much a beg, though. You instructed me, and you know that I was.
Well, no, I mean I'm at the point where for some reason I can get on shows and or even get on television. I don't do it much because I don't like to mix, especially I don't like to mix litigation with doing interviews and stuff like that. But I called Ron. I said, this is Dan Hull. And he said, who?
Not true.
And I said, Dan Hull. Oh yeah, how'd you get my number? And I said, you gave it to me a long time ago. I said, I'm really busy, you know that, so what do you want? And then I said it's about speech. Might want to talk about Proud Boys, maybe Antifa. And he said, okay, I'll let you on. And you sound pretty desperate. And I said, thanks, Ron. So
that's actually entirely accurate. Dan, however, it does not exactly have what we would call a history of being aligned with deplorables. So maybe in your case, you should give us a little bit of a sense of what you've been doing in DC and who you've been doing it with. Not the kind of detail that'll get either one of us in trouble, but kind of what was it that made you, after you've been litigating now for 65, 70 years, what it is that made you feel this great motivation before you are no longer able to participate fully in society to get on the ColemanNation podcast?
Well, I think it's fair to say that I'm not terribly ideological. I like things that work. I like people in general, and I think people solve problems. And I have been a little bit concerned in the last probably 4 or 5 years, some of the things I've seen with respect to speech, because all liberalism and civilization, Western, Eastern, anything, sort of begins with speech. And I see that getting sort of a short shrift if not being attacked. So I really haven't changed my politics much, but most of my background is I'm a corporate America brat. And I was born in DC, but I grew up in Aberdeen, Maryland, Chevy Chase, Grand Rapids, Chicago, 2 different times, Detroit, and then we ended up in the promised land of Cincinnati. And I was in the suburb I grew up in, was usually one of the few people who voted Democrat. And I did it primarily to annoy people, and it worked. And it was I am a baby boomer and a probably one that would be called a classic white liberal during most of my life. And I still consider myself to be that. But I think everything begins and ends with speech. You have nothing without it. And we've talked about that before. So that's led me to do some other things, including going from sitting on Democratic boards and raising money for Hillary Clinton to registering Republican a few years ago, not because I'm a heavy Republican, I'm not, but I thought I should change it. And I did not vote for Trump the first time. I voted for Trump the second time. Excuse me, I'm usually pretty bad with predicting who's going to be president. I picked the wrong campaigns. I worked for Wes Clark diligently in San Diego. That didn't work when I lived there. And I do like participating in keeping my hand in. And I've always been kind of an activist, but I don't think you would call it liberal or conservative. Certainly some of the things I've been saying lately, people associate with the right, but I don't think there's anything right wing about me. I like speech.
Well, what was it that managed to get you kicked off Twitter, for example?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. It was, I don't know. I know it came at the right time because I was spending too much time on Twitter in the sense that if I just wanted to vent, I was traveling a lot. I've always traveled a lot. If I had some, funny insight or something that I thought people should think about, I would, wherever I was, I would do it. But about in January, I was kicked off for the second time. And I don't know why, and I've never appealed it. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of going through that. So I didn't appeal either time, but it happened at a time when I was plugging my clothing for the homeless program. And which I think you know about.
Yes, and it was kind of always strange when we would get these pitches from you because all of a sudden you'd stop being the very humorous and iconoclastic and edgy Dan Hall, and all of a sudden you'd say, "Hey, by the way, people are really cold out there."
No, street people are a pain in the ass, all right? But I don't think we should let them freeze to death. And I know enough from living in cities most of my life, even though I kind of grew up in rural areas as a kid, that, when they have the 30 most coldest nights, people do suffer from hypothermia, and they do that because they don't want to go to the shelters, and there's good reasons for that.
Good reasons to not want to go.
Yeah, they don't want to go. Don't
Sure.
want to go. It could be, and it's not a mental illness thing. They just don't always. They just don't want to go. Women don't feel safe. People think they're going to get ripped off, so they stay outside and they die. And I think that's wrong. However, during the warmer times, I think it's okay to say get a job. But yeah, it's just, and I grew up with that tradition.
But you were mentioning this by way of explaining something else. I had asked you how you managed to get off Twitter or get banned.
Yeah. I really don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I assume it's because somebody reported me, but I wasn't doing anything. But I know I was kicked off Twitter around the time of the midterm elections 2.5 years ago, and then it happened again in January. But I really don't know. I was kicked off above the law by a good friend of mine named David Latt, and that was for allegedly, I don't know what it was. I made some joke about
Probably women.
it probably was, and around that time they decided it would be a good idea to ban all the comments. So we started our own discourse somewhere else. But they weren't the comments weren't they weren't racist. They weren't racist. They weren't sexist. They weren't homophobic. They're just funny. They were just funny, and a lot of them are just funny. And one of the things I've noticed is that the left has not only become illiberal, it's just not funny anymore. I mean, they don't have a sense of humor, and there's this solemn kind of seriousness about everything that they do. And you see that particularly when and that's one of the things I want to talk about with Antifa versus the Proud Boys. Antifa is really serious. Nothing's a joke. And whereas Proud Boys and some other groups have been associated, for some reason, been mislabeled far right or extremist, have a sense of humor and are satirical. But I don't think about Twitter that much anymore. I do miss it because I miss some of the people on it. But the people who run Twitter, I'm sure, are well-intentioned, but really don't get civics. And I don't know if that's a generational thing. And it's astounding. They think good tyranny is okay.
Well, it's not just the people who run Twitter who think that, right? I mean, I think that's a pretty widespread way of looking at things now among a very substantial part of the country, mostly the left.
Sure. And the national infrastructure is sort of set up so that schools, increasingly corporations, the academic community, certain upper middle class neighborhoods, almost everyone is saying to themselves, you know, we don't want you to say things that not that just so much might be upsetting, but things that aren't the right view. And that's one of the things I don't really understand about the left right now. They've decided, you know, how fast we should evolve, how we should evolve, and what's okay to say and what's not okay to say. And I don't get it at all. I just think it's odd, and I think it's odd that people in the Democratic Party call themselves liberals now. I haven't met liberals in the Democratic Party, at least rank and file residents in Washington, D.C. in years.
What happened to the people? I mean, somebody like Nancy Pelosi, I don't know if you know her. I mean, listeners should understand that Dan has really been involved in Democratic Party politics and networking and relationships, and as a civic exercise for decades.
Sure.
He knows a lot of people. He knows a lot of people. How are these people rational? The old people who, my age, your age, how are they rationalizing this surrender of traditional liberal approaches to speech and expression?
That's a really good question. And I thought about the answer to it. When I say to people, I have not met a liberal Democrat in a while, people, they either kind of drop their jaws or they say nothing because they know what I mean. They know what I mean. And in certain cases from some people, from probably the better educated people, for whom their quote intellectualism was so important as a liberal, they think I got a point and they don't really have an answer to it. So I think the left gets that they abandoned free speech, they abandoned expression, and that to a certain extent they abandoned humor.
I believe that what the mental process here, tell me what you think of this, is that, we're making compromises on this now, but the threat from the right, Trumpism and white supremacy, these threats are so acute that we have to take a sort of war attitude right now to repressing them and preventing them from being part of the national conversation. It's more important that we maintain power and safeguard institutions, but burn down the village in order to save it kind of mentality. At least there's a ration. I mean, look, burn down the village in order to save it is a running joke that comes out of Vietnam, but it wasn't something that had no logic behind it whatsoever. As silly as it is, you can convince yourself that makes a lot of sense.
One of the things I've noticed, and I'm in the process of learning this and trying to figure it out, but one of the things that's very obvious to me is Americans don't know each other anymore geographically, and they've sort of reduced each other to, cultural stereotypes in a lot of ways. And I noticed that in particular when people, even some of my smarter friends who are liberals, talk about people who live in southern Missouri or Arkansas, the Little Rock area or whatever. They have this certain stereotype in their mind of kind of maybe slightly advanced hillbillies, not like it was maybe 50 years ago, but people who are still into guns and religion, and that's all they really think about. And that's not who they are at all. I have relatives that my family's been in southern Missouri since about the Civil War, and they've been in Virginia since 1750, and that's not the way they think. That's not the way they do things. And they're very quiet, and they tend to work hard. And I don't mean like, they're hardworking Americans and they're just won't have anything to do with anything, but they tend to want to give good ideas, quote, good ideas, the benefit of the doubt. So if they see an administration like Clinton administration or a Barack Obama administration, they see things that look like good ideas that are steeped in kindness and toleration. They don't want to get in the way of that. So they'll sort of step back and say, that's fine. It's not that they don't think of themselves as racist. They're not racist, but they think, okay, the pendulum will swing back when we get another president, and we'll be able to see some slow change people. That would be Republicans. When Trump came in, something very unusual happened. when Hillary Clinton, who I like, and I know one of the Clintons pretty well, they're both amazing people, but when she would not go to the South, not go to the Midwest, then she should have known better. She is, she basically grew up in a Republican suburb of Chicago, like I grew up in a Republican suburb of Cincinnati. She knows that she should have gone and talked to the people who live in the South, live in the Midwest, talk to them, court their votes. And she or the people who worked for her decided that we are the chosen, and we will tell you how. I mean, it came off this way. We will tell you how to think. We know that you want me to be president because I'm a woman, and it's my time, and I don't have to go down to Tennessee, Arkansas, Michigan, and the West and kiss your ass and ask for your vote. But she did. She did have to, and that was a big mistake. And they got Trump elected. These people are slow to anger, and there's a lot of them, and they've been here since the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. They tend to be white, but they're not all white.
They're not all white, or they're not all white.
They're different colors, but they tend to come from a Northern European background, and they've been here a long time, and they just don't like the idea of suddenly not counting. And it's not a matter of being humiliated or cast out. It's just kind of like, why don't you ask us what we think about these things? I think that same-sex marriage really hit a lot of those people very hard, and not for religious reasons, but just because they felt like they weren't even consulted about it.
Well, they weren't. They were. I mean, that was the signal. That was the signal event. That's, for me, I really don't have a lot of interest in who marries whom. I mean, I do think that morality is something that should be part of our, of our government. But be that as it may, that wouldn't be a hill that I would die on, except for the fact that, as Scalia pointed out in his dissent to Obergefell, the problem here wasn't a lack of democracy. It wasn't, for the majority, it was an excess of democracy. Almost every state, but not every state, where it was put to a vote, said no.
Right.
So activists said, well, fine, we'll get judges to vote instead. And that offends the people that you're talking about, and not only people like me.
I know, and there's a lot of these people, and I think that I don't know if it's the internet or a sort of lack of. It's ironic to me that as people are supposed to get smarter, and we have millennials supposed to be good with tech, that we have people who are very poorly educated about folks in our immediate ambit, other states, in addition to Europe. In fact, I know people who know more about Europe than they know about Indiana or Missouri or Tennessee or Arkansas, and that's wrong.
Well, do they know about Europe, or do they know about Europe as of 15 or 20 years ago? Because Europe today is not what they probably remember.
Well, it's another good question. I mean, it's a little bit like, who I tend to give everything around me a wide berth, and you can go to Europe with other Americans and be in an American bubble, either as a tourist or as a journalist. And that's one of the reasons I do not like tours, and I do not like to go to Europe unless I'm working. If I'm working, I can understand it. It means more to me. And I'm probably not it's likely to be around, other Americans. I mean, I like Americans, but I'd like to experience Europe and other places from the standpoint of the people who actually live there. And I had a girlfriend who is a good example of this. We're still very good friends. She was from Scarsdale. She went to Tufts in Columbia, and then she went to LA to start a career in show business. And she had never been to a Midwestern or Southern state until she met my parents at the age of, 50. I mean, that's wrong. that's just unusual. But to get back to what we're talking about, like, what happened? What was the pivotal event? There were a number of things that happened, but I think that we've expected with presidential administrations, most of us over the age of, 40 or 45, that there is a pattern here. There's a pendulum swings back and forth, and you have Democrats for a while, they do their ideas. Republicans come in and do theirs. And when Trump was elected, which was an extraordinary thing, I was absolutely shocked, as I think a lot of other people were, is the way he was treated coming in and immediately after he was inaugurated. It was astounding to me. It changed everything for me. And I'm not sure it changed my political views, but it changed, it made me disrespect the people that I'd grown up respecting, which was the mainstream press, a lot of intellectuals, a lot of the white liberals that I had known. It was almost like they had been so spoiled and so conditioned to think that they can get their way and get their progress, if you will, year in, year out, administration in, administration out. And America's never been like that. We go back and forth, we go back and forth. Slow change is what, quote, conservatives are usually about. Democrats are usually about a little bit quicker change. But when I saw, Carl Bernstein is a very good example. He was a hero of mine. He went absolutely nuts when Trump was elected, and he knew well. Carl's like 10 years older than I am. I was absolutely amazed at the way he came after Trump, because Trump isn't everybody's cup of tea, but anybody who's followed him since the 70s, the 80s know that he's not a racist. He wasn't a misogynist. He wasn't, he was an arrogant business guy out of New York, kind of a John Lindsay Democrat, if you will, in a lot of ways. And not the personality everybody loved, but as soon as he declares, what was it, June 2015, he's immediately a racist. He's immediately this, immediately that.
A guy who's been in the public eye in New York City for his entire life, suddenly he's a racist. They just ran with it.
They ran with it. It was childish. It was childish. It was like, and I thought, I kind of understand it, and I thought it was interesting. I remember going on a show kind of like this one where somebody was interviewing me and saying, "I understand you're a Trump supporter." I say, this is before Trump was elected. I said, "I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton because I'm loyal, but Trump's done a lot of things for us already. He's opened up the conversation, what we can talk about. He's changed press coverage. He's made conversations occur that could not have occurred, but for him, and it's making everybody nuts." And part of the conventional wisdom was that he was engendering or inflaming racism or making people more racist. No, he was just saying what people were thinking.
Well, okay, hold on a second. I mean, when you say that, he was just saying what people are thinking isn't really a contradiction in and of itself. If he had been saying, "Listen, I know what you're all thinking. Blacks are inferior. I know what you're all thinking. White people should rule the country," then he would be racist and he would just be saying what people are thinking. But what he was saying was, shouldn't we be focusing on making sure that Americans have jobs before we provide incentives for immigrants to come here? Shouldn't we be enforcing certain laws that are being ignored? In other words, he was saying what everybody was thinking, but hardly any of that was about race. In fact, until Obama, I think a lot of us felt we kind of did, not until Obama, by virtue of the election of Obama. It was why we did it.
Yeah,
we graduated.
I agree. Donald Trump is no racist. He likes people. He's good with people. I've seen him a few times in a room. I haven't met him. This is a guy who's good with people, not unlike Bill Clinton, not unlike Joe Biden, not unlike, in some ways, Hillary Clinton. In fact, all four of those people, I would say, are very similar. Very similar. They all like power. You want Cruz, he's ideological. I mean, that's Bernie Sanders is ideological, but these are people who, like power, like the exercise of power, like ideas, and they need to be on a team. So you've got some Democrats and Republicans, and they're actually people who like each other in real life.
I mean, John, you make a very important point. What they like is power, and this is something you find obviously on both sides of the aisle. But I've always said to myself, I voted for Bill Clinton in 1992 because I didn't see anything attractive about George H.W. Bush. After 4 years, I didn't like James Baker one bit, his Israel policy. And Clinton was singing a song of democratic centrism. And I said, my gosh, this could do it. This just could, maybe we can recapture the center here. And then I looked at what Hillary Clinton had become, and I said to myself, I don't know what her views ever were, but I know what Bill Clinton purported to be. And how does he sit there quietly, the guy who had been a centrist Democrat, while the party that she's leading is veering off so severely to the left? Answer: it was about power.
No, I think that's right. And at the time, I'm involved with a group, as you know, that the Clintons helped start years ago, and it's one of these groups that has a lot of stability. It tends to be liberals, not all liberals. And I know that at the time that a lot of the Hillary Clinton campaign was ramping up, and a lot of the times that decisions were made about who would be running it and who would not be running the campaign, he was having perceived health problems. And I think he was a little less hale and hearty than usual. And now I think he's okay. And you could just see I can't figure out the right year, but he needed to make some changes in his lifestyle. And, just ones that we can all make.
He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's even older than you.
It's an interesting group of people you're talking about too, because almost all the people who've been in power for the last few years are 7 or 8 years older than me. They're all born around 44, 45, 40. It's fascinating to me. And they're the real baby boomers, right? And they tend to hold on to power. They tend to be very, whether they're male or female, very quote unquote masculine in their approach to things. And they think they know better, which is fine. I mean, that's true of a lot of us who get involved in certain professions and certain activities, but they really are kind of an astounding group of people, no matter what side of the political aisle they're on.
Speaking of astounding, I want to shift the conversation, because believe it or not, the problem with you and me is that we will talk for very long periods of time, and our listeners might not want to listen to us for that long. And there were some things you really wanted to talk about.
I really think that the press, journalism, which I am from time to time involved with, and I worked, as you know, on a student paper. I became a full-time journalist. I like journalists. That the group of people who are doing it became different. And I think part of the reason the coverage is different is not because of the competition or kind of some kind of backlash to Trump, is that you have millennial journalists. And millennials are very different than you and I.
You think?
No, they are. They're astounding. I've even been on, I'm famous for talking about this, although I haven't for a while, used to be. They're just wired very, very differently. And one of the things, I spend a fair amount of time with people who are younger socially, and I see them, and one of the things you can tell is they've never had speech, they've never had expression, they've never had satire, they've never had gaudiness, they've never had anything except this sort of, the men were told to respect and put on a pedestal women, which is fine. It backfired a little bit. The men that I know are a little lost. This is almost anyone between 25 and 40. And they laugh at the most strangest things. Like if you say something that any baby boomer would say, not just Dan Hall or Ron Coleman, 15, 20 years ago, they just giggle like little girls because they've never had any speech. I think you see a lot of these people, speech in the way we think of it, not a First Amendment speech, but just expression speech, things you can talk about in the workplace. For Christ's sakes, where do people get to know you better than in the workplace? You can't say anything there. It's very sterile.
Right.
I can see that. Everyone's very different. So they have a different sense of they feel like it's okay to enforce good tyranny, good ideas. It's okay to enforce, I was thinking about LBJ the other day. LBJ became a racial hero, a racial progress hero, because his timing with Martin Luther King was perfect, absolutely perfect. But even though the civil rights, law had been overdue it was almost 100 years since emancipation when it was enacted. I think it was 1964. I remember that. I remember that. You were 1 year old, right? I was 11.
Right.
I remember these things, Ron. I've been watching you.
Am I a baby boomer?
Spiritually, yes. Well, no. Well, actually, you are. If you're born in the end is. I know you were born in the end is 66. So what you are is a subset called Generation Jones, which is like the snarkier baby boomers who are kind of like Gen X. But I have a lot of friends who are, yeah.
You know why? Because by the time we were of age, you guys had used it all up.
I don't know. I mean, I'm still mid-level. I mean, everybody jokes about how I'm the oldest blogger ever. Norm Pattis the other day said, "How old are you?" Anyway, I told him. He said, "Jesus Christ, there's somebody older." Thank you very much, Norm.
Many of our listeners are even younger than I am, Dan. Tell them who Norm Pattis is.
Norm Pattis is a very good Wayne Kunstler-esque. He's the kind of guy who probably modeled his career as I could have on helping the poor, the dispossessed, good civil rights lawyer, fabulous criminal lawyer. And he is a lot like me in the sense that he thinks everything begins with speech. And he's saying things now, as I am, that sound kind of right-wing or quote right-wing or conservative. And he has a ponytail.
Has he said anything about the Proud Boys?
No, as you know, and Norm knows, because I've been consulting him a little bit. I am representing a couple of one Proud Boy and one Proud Boy accusee. Somebody's being accused of it, and forget about who they are. But it got me very interested in this whole notion of like, what's going on with this Proud Boy thing? I mean, I have met lots of Antifa people here, and they're kind of sexually ambiguous, a little angry, very young, even younger than the Proud Boys. But they're very smart and very well organized. And no, they are not like a loose group of people or just an idea or in somebody's head. They are a group of people, and there's a lot of them, and they have an agenda, and that's fine. They can. This is America, you're allowed to have an agenda. The Proud Boys were really interesting to me because, first of all, they all look like the fishing guides I've had growing up and fishing in Alaska, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee. I mean,
You mean professional fishermen, full-time fishermen?
Full-time fishermen or fishing guides.
Not anglers.
No, and they get the beards, and it's this very masculine thing. And I learned later, and I'm still learning. By the way, everybody should read the book that Mark Bray wrote called Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. You got to read it just because of when it was written. And it was written in the middle of Trump's first year. He's very honest about what Antifa is and what it is not. We'll get to that in a second. But what I couldn't understand about the Proud Boys was I saw them. I lived in downtown DC. I worked not too far from the Ellipse. And I saw them for at least 4 of their rallies. You'd see them walking around. And to me, they didn't look scary at all. And they were a small subset of the people who were there, who increasingly, as the months went on, November, December, and then January 6th, looked just kind of like people you'd see at the Ohio State Fair. We're just like, people I've seen my whole life.
Regular people, I think, would be the
No,
term.
and there were people from Beverly Hills, and there were people from like New Canaan, Connecticut. And it was getting pretty cheeky, to be involved with this. And I didn't see people there as, by the way, protesting the steal of an election. It was more like getting together and having kind of a last party. But the Proud Boys were there, and the Proud Boys are playful and fun. And I was reading about them, and I was trying to figure out how they could ever have been designated as a hate group. I mean, they are, the worst thing you can say about them is that it's just an all-male group. Okay, well, that's cool. Sometimes I want to be around just men. Sometimes I want to be around just Irish people. Sometimes I just want to be around recovering alcoholics. It depends.
I see you're narrowing and narrowing the subsets.
Yeah. No, sometimes I just want to be around my Jewish friend. Sometimes, every once in a while, this could make news. I want to be around just really boring, goofy-looking Anglos like me, who come from places like England and Germany. But it's okay to want to be a member of a club that has an anatomical kind of demographic to it. And then the other thing about them is that they were. Sometimes the word chauvinist has been used, but if you look at their bylaws, which you reminded me of the other day when we were talking, when I was trying to tell you who the hell I was, and their bylaws are really about, there's so many good things that they say they're involved with, and I don't think they're rhetorical devices. You look at their bylaws, and you look at their early Gavin McGinnis era statements about what they really are. They're funny and playful and a little bit satirical, but this is a real group. This is like a real fraternity. This is like the Phi Delta at Duke, you know.
Right.
And they are guys, and they like Western civilization. I thought, Western civilization, well, what's not to like? I mean, isn't that like, you know, let's see, that's Greece and Rome and Egypt. Then we have the Dark Ages, we have Renaissance, and then we have certain kinds of political institutions emerging in Germany and France and in the British Isles. That's given us a lot. Eastern religion and Eastern culture has given us a lot too. But you know, Western civilization, that's good, and therefore Western civilization. Why is that a hate group? Why is that far right? And even some of my more intelligent friends in the Fourth Estate, and I know a few people who are reporting on the very things that I'm involved with now with these two clients.
Right.
They use the expression far right almost in every paragraph. And if I can do nothing else on this sort of, you know, Proud Boy press tour I apparently am going on, I would like people to realize that there's nothing far right or extremist or neo-fascist or white nationalist about promoting Western civilization. I do have a friend who works for one of the wire services, who's a very good writer, who says, well, these are the wrong guys, you know, to be behind Western civilization. I said, well, nobody else is doing it. The professors aren't. You don't see it in the press. You don't see all these like not woke, but white liberals and corporations. I mean, all these people are, excuse the expression, chicken shit. They're not doing anything. At least somebody's doing something. And, you know, like in any new group, you have problems, but Proud Boy started in 2016. It was started by a comedian. I think that's interesting. I will tell you that Antifa was not started by a comedian. They
Nor does it admit any.
Nor did it admit any. And it's a very, I think, very self-deprecating, but I don't see, you know, and I don't say things like this unless I really mean them. And I guess I have something to lose. I've lost a few friends already. I lost a client over this, a good client that I had for 30 years. I don't see anything wrong with promoting Western civilization. And how Western got to be synonymous with some kind of white supremacy is beyond me. It just blows me away. Western civilization has allowed us to have conversations in democratic institutions that were not here before. And I want to throw a nod to the French. These institutions and these ideas happen to be funneled and preserved by parts of the world in Europe, like in Vienna, Paris, Florence, still to this day, London. Yeah, that's Western Europe, Central Europe, and Northern Europe, but it's given us a lot.
But you're not giving. If you want to give credit to France, though, John, you have to.
Dan,
you have to also.
Why do you call me? This is funny. I am called
Dan.
John a lot. But
Is
that
funny?
because you're looking at my name?
I don't know why I would call you John. I've never called you John in my life.
You can call me John twice. It's okay. We'll talk about it after the meeting.
Yeah, that is odd.
No. So I answer to John. I have to because, you know, I have numerals after my name. I mean, all of us Western guys do.
And all of you white guys are called John.
All of them will call JD or John. And I was named in effect. I finally figured this out by a guy who was a Confederate cavalry soldier. Isn't that amazing?
Well, there you
So there's something wrong with this interview right now. I mean, you should probably just cut it off.
You're complicit. No, but what I wanted to say, went back when you were John, going back to being Dan, is that if you want to give a shout out to France, you have to give a shout out to Derrida and to deconstruction. And the fact is, all the things that you just listed as being inherent goods, basically liberal values, are rejected by the left now. The left does not represent. There's nothing liberal about it. Their interest is in power and control, not in. They consider democracy not to be an inherent good that doesn't need to be explained, but rather something to be feared, and something unless it works for them. So if judges get, if democracy doesn't work for them, then judges will get them what they want. But the contempt for differing points of view or Trump voters is entirely incompatible with a democracy, but the idea that, hey, maybe this year I'll vote for a Democrat, maybe this year I'll vote for a Republican because I'm interested in this person seems to have a good faith approach to governing.
No, I agree with you totally, except that I hear people say that the elites and the Democratic Party is only about power. I don't, I think that they have better intentions than that. I mean, all sorts of bad things have better
Who's
intentions.
the they? When you say they, whose face appears before you when you in your mind when you say they?
No. The Democrat, I think that all they have left, I mean, it's an inference you can draw. What else could they be interested in except just power? I mean, here's 12 tenets. I was just looking at these of the Proud Boy tenets that the left rejects, so the Democratic Party, a lot of them reject. There's 12. I'm gonna read them, and this is fascinating. And these are not rhetorical devices. This is what Proud Boys are about. Minimal government. Okay, that's okay. That's not too right wing. Maximum freedom, anti-political correctness. There's 3. Anti-drug war, anti-racism, closed borders, reinstating a spirit of Western chauvinism. I'm not sure I would use the word chauvinism. It sounds militaristic, but that's okay. I get it. Anti-racial guilt. You shouldn't feel bad about being a white guy or a white woman or a white boy or white girl. Pro-free speech, pro-gun rights. That's cool. Glorifying the entrepreneur, fine. And here's the most evil one, venerating the housewife. The 12 tenets of Proud Boys. That was written like in the very beginning. It's a relatively new group. I don't think they've changed that much. I might have relabeled these a little bit, but what's wrong with that? I mean, what's wrong with any of that? I don't get it.
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. You're asking the wrong guy, obviously. So, Dan, how did you manage? Was it the alcohol to be so open-minded about all this? What we find is that people consider themselves lifetime members, and this is what I'm going to sort of close with in terms of our discussion, just because of time. Why do you suppose you didn't just say, listen, I'm on this team. I've spent my life investing in this team. This is where I've known. This is who I know. This is how I can maximize. I'm still practicing law. I need these contacts. I can't offend clients or prospective clients. Why do you think you, unlike so many other successful professionals and the people in our profession, the legal profession, why were you able to do it and open your mind up to saying, maybe I should look at the world and the people around me for myself rather than accept the narratives?
It's true. And you made a reference to alcohol. This summer, I'm going to have 3.5 decades, 35 years of not having a drink or a drug, which is a good thing, but I don't define myself that way. When I was talking to somebody at the end of college, they were asking me about, we were saying, what were you like when you were a freshman? This was our senior year. And everybody said I was very honest. I like being as honest as I can. I don't really have anything to hide that I know of. And once you get to the point where you really don't care what people think and you're willing to be honest about yourself and what you've done and haven't done, it's a superpower. It helps to work for yourself, but I keep getting people telling me things like, and they're right in a sense. They say, well, they're right in some context. You can do this now because you're older, you're established, you have your own firm, and blah, 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 blah. Well, the truth is, if you don't get that way before you become older and established, you're never going to be able to be honest with yourself and the rest of the world. You just can't do it. So, I feel sorry for people who say to me, I'd love to help you, Dan. I'm a millennial. I'm 35. I work for a big firm, but I can't say any of the things that you're saying or even have a discussion about them because I might not make partner. You were allowed to say all sorts of outrageous things when I was coming up. And it was formal and you had to be polite and civil, but you're allowed to have discussions about how the world worked, who you were, what you didn't do. And I just have not, I have problems with the group that helped get me sober. I mean, the group that helped get me sober is a worldwide phenomena, yet it's still in the guise of anonymous to attract people. And I'd rather choke to death or fall over than walk around and have my clients and people I work with not know who I really am. So that probably helps a little bit. I also don't consider myself, I mean, I never considered myself to be politically correct. Here's the only thing that made sense about me registering Republican. I've always had a problem with unions because of an experience I had working in a factory, keyboard cookie factory, when I was 18, and somebody basically came up and told me not to work so hard. It threw me. It threw me. Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to work so hard? And all my friends were going to Europe. I was working in a factory. No, we weren't poor. I just figured, what the hell? I got to do something this summer. So I worked in a keyboard cookie factory until I cut my finger off. It's a long story. I was probably the only person at Duke freshman year who was getting workers' comp. I just don't look at the world as a team sport. I don't look as America as a team sport. There's lots of ideas and ideologies. And we need to see a little this one, a little that one, but it's people that solve problems. And what I don't like, and I know we didn't really talk about this, but what I don't like about Antifa, and I'm learning more about them, is that they have this great ruse going on. I won't call it a ruse, we'll call it a dodge. BLM does something of the same, but with Antifa, it's brilliant. Antifa has decided there's no First Amendment right and no right of expression where fascism, is involved. I mean, there's just, you don't debate fascism, you destroy it. That's a quote from someone from 50 years ago. And what a great dodge. What a scam. I get to decide what's fascist, I get to decide what's fascist. And what I'm finding is, and I think this is true if you kind of look at the Antifa rank and file, a lot of it, anything that is, quote, masculine or aggressive is considered fascist to an Antifa type person.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Anything I don't like is that, and BLM is really gotten a lot of mileage with this because nobody likes to be called a racist, especially millennials, because they feel guilty about everything. Millennial men feel guilty about aggressing women sexually. I mean, human nature has been demonized in millennial culture.
Everything I don't like is fascist.
How that happened, it's so sad. But there really is a very serious kind of way of looking at the world that some of these anti-fascist groups have, and Antifa in particular. And they're very smart, at least smart enough not to be in the Capitol on January 6th for the most part. Maybe one guy, and he was nuts, right? So far in what we're finding out. But the only point I wanted to make, and I know you're running out of time, is that Antifa is very serious, no playfulness at all. And it really, if you read the book by Mark Bray, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, and it's very honest. And one of the things is, I'd love to do a search for the word masculine, because when they see masculine, something, quote, masculine or traditionally masculine, that's fascist. Jesus Christ, if I walked around with that weapon, I could call anything fascist.
Do your old friends in the among Democrats, do you think they believe that they can control Antifa?
They keep telling me at this point, first of all, it's a lot like when I say I don't mean liberal Democrats anymore. They just look at me like they don't know what to say. Not that that's a brilliant statement to make. Democrats in the left, quote, the left has become illiberal. They've become bigots. And the way they justify it is they say, well, if it's a bad idea or an idea that's not good and doesn't have sweetness and light in it, we can condemn it and shut it down. And I think they think of Antifa, to answer your question, is still sort of an idea and not a group of people. And that's wrong. This is a group of people, and they're good at what they do. They've been doing a lot longer than the Proud Boys. We gotta have a part 2 on Proud Boys and Antifa at some point, but that's after you're able to get Liza Minnelli and the other people.
See, that's the beauty of Dan Hull, is that not only does he invite himself on, he invites himself to come back.
And we'll just do 3. No, I appreciate being able to talk about this a little bit.
You're great. Dan, it's true. It's listening to you. You should just be the other guy in the podcast. We should just do the Ron and Dan.
Well, maybe we can. We should switch names. You could be Hull, I could be Coleman. how'd you get an Irish last name, for Christ's sake?
It's a good question. That's a very good question. I told you the Irish Airlines story about my dad.
You did. And my favorite moment on Twitter is when some people thought the two of us together were being Jews. I got to be a Jew for about a day. Like, what's wrong with these guys? And when somebody said they're Jews, I thought, this is it. I've arrived.
On that note, you've arrived, and now we're going to depart. Thank you, Dan. We will have you back. We, me, Jeremy, and I, my producer.
Thanks for putting up with me. I appreciate it.
Great talking to you. Hey, thank you for listening to the ColemanNation podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. If you like the show, please rate it 5 stars and leave a review. For more information, please visit the show's website at ColemanNation.com. That's Coleman-Nation.com. Or you can visit my blog at likelihoodofconfusion.com. Join us next time on the Coleman Nation podcast and have a great day.